Hi, my name is Grace Foley, and I'm going to be talking to you actually about a pretty recent murder. So on Wednesday, March 25th, 2020, Martha McKay, age 63, was found dead at her family's historic Snowden house on Horseshoe Lake in Hughes, Arkansas. The Snowden house is a colonial style house. It was built in 1919, and McKay had moved to a house on Horseshoe Lake from San Francisco post her mother's death and had turned it into a lavish bed and breakfast and also a wedding venue. It's a gorgeous white house, very classically Southern, with a large screened in porch. Definitely would have had my wedding there had there not been a murder. The property had also been the location for a 1994 movie, so it was very popular, and McKay lived and worked on the property full time. So on Wednesday night, two deputies responded to a call from neighbors about a disturbance at the historic house. Upon arriving on the scene, they reported that they found an open back door and then proceeded to go into the house. Upon clearing the house, they had located a possible suspect who then jumped from the window upstairs and ran to his nearby vehicle. He drove across the yard of the house and got stuck in the mud outside the Snowden house. The suspect then jumped from his car and ran and jumped into the lake, Horseshoe Lake, outside the house. He was observed going under the water and then never came back up. And this is all according to a Facebook post from the sheriff's office. So police re-entered the home and recovered McKay's body, and neighbors at the scene claimed that she was stabbed, while others say that a hammer was used to kill her. So the Crittenden County Search and Rescue eventually called and were able to use sonar equipment to locate and recover the body of the suspect outside in the lake. And both bodies were taken to the medical examiner to determine the cause of death. But the plot thickens. So the police were able to identify the man who had jumped out the window. The obvious main suspect was a 39-year-old named Travis Lewis. And he had been on parole for 2 years since 2018 for, get this, the murder of McKay's mother and cousin 24 years prior in what Memphis Commercial Appeals called one of the most infamous murders in recent Mid-South history, aka the Snowden murders. So, according to police reports, 2 decades prior, Lewis, who was then 16 years old, was believed to have shot Sally, who was McKay's mother, and Joseph Lee Baker, her cousin, and a well-known Memphis blues rock guitarist, because they had startled him as he was attempting to rob the Snowden house. Lewis pleaded guilty to killing McKay's mother and Joseph Lee Baker on September 10th, 1996. And he was tried as an adult even though he was 16, and he was given 20 and a half years in prison for the killings, but was released on parole after 22 years in 2018. And it's worth noting that there were also reports that Martha was in touch with Lewis while he was in prison and also after he was released. And the sheriff was even quoted saying, "I think it was her mission to find out what happened to her mother and to find out if someone else was involved." So this was a really difficult case, I thought, because there are a lot of questions as for motive for not only the most recent murder, but also for the 1996 murders. However, that's where I was really able to connect to the criminological theories we had discussed in class. The first theory I connected this case to was that there might have been biological and psychological factors that attributed to these murders. So Lewis was only 16 when he shot Sally and Joseph in cold blood during a robbery gone wrong. And I don't know, I think it's personally hard to believe that by 16, Lewis had faced enough hardships and strife that many sociological theories we talked about are backed by that couldn't have been warranted to commit those crimes. There wasn't enough. Though he definitely could have, and he probably did. We just don't have that information to make those assumptions. So without that information, I was led to look at this case through sort of a biocriminal lens. And since Lewis was so young, I thought there could be a lot of biological and psychological factors that attributed to the crime. So, was he abused or maltreated as a child, which is a universal risk factor for antisocial behavior? That could also explain why he was so easily startled and shot them both. Was he triggered by something? Or was he possibly hypoglycemic and it was truly a robbery gone wrong where he shot them without even realizing it? Or could there have been more biological factors? Did he have inadequate maternal or paternal affection and supervision, or possibly a parental conflict? Was someone in his family often deviant and he observed this growing up, and then this led him to behave similarly according to social learning theories? So, all of these, I believe, definitely could have and likely did have an effect on the cause of the Snowden murders in 1996. The second theory I connected this case to was the labeling theory. So, after committing the first murders and serving 22 years for them, Lewis was obviously and reasonably labeled a violent felon. This, without question, had to have a severe effect on his life after being released from prison. I mean, obviously, he had no doubt had trouble getting a job, probably making friends, developing relationships. 22 years is a really long time to be in prison. A lot had changed probably in the world, and he just probably generally had a tough time supporting himself, as any violent felon probably does. So, according to the labeling theory, this label he now carried could have ultimately led him to continue to be criminal. And it makes even more sense in this specific case, I think, because his second criminal act, the most recent murder of Martha McKay on Wednesday, this could have very easily been motivated by revenge for the label he received for murdering her mother in the exact same place. We also know that Martha supposedly was in contact with Lewis during and after his release from prison, which I believe also supports the labeling theory in this case, just in the fact that he probably knew who she was, probably knew that she still lived in that house and operated a business out of it that probably brought in a lot of money for her, and that could have motivated him as well. So I was really perplexed by these murders when I first read about them because there seemed to be no real clear motive, and it was just too strange that the same guy went back to the same house to murder the daughter of a woman he killed just 2 years after getting out of jail for that murder. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. At least to me, it didn't. But that's where I actually had a lot of fun kind of connecting the dots and being a criminological theories detective for this case. I really think the two theories I connected of biological and psychological factors, as well as the labeling theory, are both really strong leads as to why Lewis committed these murders and did what he did. And I'd be really interested to know more about his background because I'm sure we could also connect them to sociological theories to the motives behind these murders. Um, all in all, I think I learned, and I would want people to take away from this, is that there is always more to the story than what meets the eye, and just to look at things more critically and to educate yourself on factors that are sometimes out of a person's control for things not just criminal, but things that you need in your everyday life as well, and just to be more mindful of that.